They can succeed very well even in this. Alright guys, in this video I want to talk about the state of the Chinese economy. How is the economy here in China doing? This affects all stocks, not just NIO stock, also Alibaba stock, also JD stock, all these Chinese stocks. So this just recently broke the news. A apartment complex that was 5 kilometers away from Tiananmen Square, the center of Beijing, sold for only 30,000 RMB per square meter. Crazy. A 100 meters squared apartment used to cost 10 million RMB, now only costs 4 million RMB. A whopping more than 50%, upwards of 60-70% drop in the real estate price. And we're seeing right now is that everyone's salaries are being reduced. We are entering a deflationary cycle here in China. Let me elaborate a little bit more. So some cities have real estate selling at cabbage price levels. This is a term that Chinese people use. 白菜价, cabbage price levels. So a 154 square meter home sold for only 250,000 RMB, which is about 1,600 RMB per square meter. And this price is cheaper than ET5, man. Holy crap. It's just unprecedented. And this is very interesting. Houses have become a depreciating asset here in China. You hear me correctly. Some apartment complexes, a new apartment sold by the manufacturer costs more than the brand new second-hand sale, which is the exact same size and unit next door, but it costs significantly less, all right, than the first-hand. The first-hand home, the manufacturer gives you free renovation, free parking spots, free this, free that. And what you're seeing is that for second-hand houses, there's price but no market, right? You label the price, but you're not going to get any transaction at that price. If you want to sell the house, you have to take a significant haircut. And what we're seeing is that houses do not have any more investment value, only residential value. Okay? The biggest reason behind this is also partially because of the 75-year term limit of a single house. Any living area, any apartment, any house, you can only have it for 75 years because it belongs to the government. So you can imagine if you've owned that for 10 years, right, or owned it for 5 years, then you've already used up 5 or 10 years of that 75-year period. And some places, they only have it for 50 years. So you've used up 20%, up to 20% of that 75-year period. So it's becoming a depreciating asset. And what's happening is as houses prices drop, people basically they have less money. More and more people, they get foreclosed on, stuff like that, and they don't have money to spend. What happens? They spend less, right? The spending just gets less. Then businesses, they suffer from that as well. There's not enough consumer spending. Then they lay off workers or they pay their workers less. And the workers, they have less money to spend, and it just keeps on going. So here in China, we're actually seeing a deflationary cycle, and it is not looking too good. Now, to be honest, there's a lot of people that do have a lot of money. All right, don't ever make that mistake. There are people with a lot of money saved up, etc. But in general, a lot of businesses, especially smaller businesses, unless you're a big corporation and you have a lot of money, most small businesses are, having trouble weathering the storm. Now, of course, how does this affect NIO? Of course, consumers' budgets being decreased, that just means they have less money to spend on cars and stuff. So obviously NIO, with the cars being very expensive, it's a lot more difficult for people to afford. But of course, rich people, the rich folks are actually not that much affected. But rich folks, if they wanted to buy a NIO, of course they can still buy a NIO. But more of the regular folks that are sort of like medium class, middle class, their budgets might be reduced substantially. So what you're saying is, of course, everybody has to do these price cuts to spur these consumer demand. And To be honest, if you look at a lot of shops here in China, they switch ownership all the time, businesses. So the overall impact is quite wide, quite severe. And you could argue that perhaps we're seeing some sort of a bottom, even though, things have dropped by a lot. How much further can it drop? Yes, you could argue that. But a lot of people here in China are saying that this is just the beginning of this whole deflationary cycle with the housing prices dropping by so much. And some people are arguing that no matter how much stimulus China adds, it's already sort of too late. Everybody's very pessimistic. And that pessimism really just makes everything so much more difficult. I mean, if the buyer of a house expects future prices to be even lower, of course, they're going to be giving a very lowball price for the houses. And here in Beijing, some of the surrounding outskirts area suffers the most from this whole debacle. Some of the houses that used to cost 1 million plus now only cost like 300,000, which is quite crazy. And keep in mind that they're that cheap only because of these are transaction prices. All right, these are transaction prices. So obviously the seller didn't want to sell it that cheap. Nobody wants to sell it that cheap, but they probably had to, they really wanted to sell the home because they thought it's going to depreciate even more, and they just accepted that low ball price. In general, people just aren't spending that much money. They're being a lot more conservative with their money, trying to save as much as they can. You're seeing a lot of people get laid off work. Finding work is kind of difficult. China, they stopped publishing the youth unemployment numbers, but, it's still quite high, like 20% A lot of people that can't find jobs, they have to resort to maybe being a delivery worker or doing DD, which is like ride hailing, that kind of stuff. So everyone has this pessimistic view of the economy. Everybody's saying the economy is not doing good. 经济不好, which is what everybody's saying. So that could be a contrarian point for people to think about. Maybe if everybody's thinking it's not good for the next couple of years, maybe that could be a very good opportunity. Now, there's something you got to understand. It does not mean that NIO cannot succeed within this period. Of course they can succeed with the sub-brand affordable car, making the car more accessible for the masses. People's budgets are probably reduced to that price category, and they can sell a lot of vehicles. If you look at Li Auto's earnings report, they've sold a ton of vehicles. Of course, at the expense of other guys, maybe like these Japanese auto dealerships, automakers, some of them have suffered quite a lot. Most of their sales going to BYD, going to traditional Chinese automakers with these new energy vehicles. So NIO can absolutely succeed with a cheap product, and that's the thing. You gotta succeed with a cheap, affordable product, and NIO's coming out with that. And also, you can think about it in this other way. If it's deflation and people, the price of things are dropping, well, then that also means that NIO can pay their employees a little bit less. The cost of raw materials, they could negotiate a lower price because nobody wants to lose business. So, it's good and bad. You can't just see it in one color. It's gray. So I think the biggest takeaway is that things are not looking pretty here in China. But if you look at Li Auto, they sold a lot of cars, right? There's definitely room for success, and they can succeed very well even in this deflationary, shitty economy. But they definitely need to get that sub-brand car out as soon as they can, and then have a very killer price with that, and just sell as many as they can, produce as many as they can. They cannot have any production delays or anything like that, and hiccups that will really hurt their success. So, yeah, it's very difficult, man. It's very difficult here in China, but I'm sure NIO will make it through. I'm sure NIO will succeed with the sub-brand. But in general, people's budgets are being reduced because of the overall economy. As always, stay safe, stay healthy. Peace out.